Well, it's very good to be back here with DDP. It feels like a family reunion. Someone just reminded me that they met me, was it 10 or 15 or 20 years ago? It's good to see them all again. What I'm going to do this afternoon is change, or try to change, the paradigm. I want people to start focusing on global cooling instead of global warming. One of the benefits of this change is that it has absolutely no impact on energy policy and no impact on CO2. With global cooling, it doesn't matter what you do about energy. In fact, the more CO2, the better. I will give three reasons, or three arguments for a paradigm shift. The first argument is that cooling is more damaging than warming. Warming is, generally speaking, good for you. Cooling is very, very damaging. We know this from historic experience. The big ice age of, let's say, 20,000 years ago or 30,000 years ago wiped out a good part of the human or subhuman population. It wiped out the Neanderthalers. And the next big ice age will wipe out a substantial part of the human population. Guaranteed. There are really two kinds of ice ages, which I'd like to explain first. There are the big ice ages, which are astronomically controlled by the orbit of the Earth, by the change in eccentricity, the change in the tilt of the axis, and the precession of the Earth's axis of rotation. These calculations were done by Milankovitch, a Serbian astronomer, early, about 100 years ago, and they're called the Milankovitch cycles. These ice ages usually last around 100,000 years, and they are interrupted by warm interglacials that usually last about 10,000 years. We're now in a warm interglacial. In fact, we're probably approaching the end of a warm interglacial called the Holocene, which will soon end. It may have already ended. We don't know that. The other kind of ice age, the second kind of ice age, is more subtle. It's not as severe. It's a cycle probably controlled by the sun of about 1,000 to 1,500 years long. The two ice ages have nothing to do with each other. They're completely independent. The 1,500-year cycle has been going on for hundreds of thousands of years. We see it very clearly in the last big glaciation. We see it also during the Holocene. The Little Ice Age, as you know, stopped about 200 years ago. It's not as severe. It did cause bad harvests. It caused starvation, disease, and death. As we know, in Europe, we have historic evidence. It may have been worldwide. Our evidence on that is fairly limited. The expert on that particular one is Willie Soon, who is, I think, in the audience and may have something to say about this. In any case, the point to get across to people is that cooling is more damaging than warming. In fact, warming is, generally speaking, good for you. That's why people move to warmer climates. And it's very good for agriculture because it gives you longer growing seasons, fewer frosts, and generally speaking, a much better result in crop yield. So together with increased CO2, which is the plant fertilizer, you get much better performance, and you can fight global hunger and global poverty. The second reason, or the second argument for a paradigm shift, is that cooling is certainly more certain and will come much sooner than any warming. In fact, as you know, it hasn't been warming for nearly 20 years. And who knows, it may continue that way. It may turn into a cooling. We don't know. But cooling is certainly, based on historic evidence, almost absolutely sure. Almost absolutely sounds like a little contrived, but you know, we can be 99% and something sure that nature doesn't change its mind quickly, and certainly not as a result of human endeavor. And the third argument is that cooling can be overcome at low cost and with low risk to the environment, while warming requires complex geoengineering, and as you know, people have been studying geoengineering to overcome a supposed global warming, but haven't done anything about it because of the side effects and the cost. Let me discuss these three arguments one by one. So the recent Milankovitch glaciation wiped out the Neanderthalers and much of the fauna. All the big animals died. Northern latitudes in Europe and in North America were covered with a very thick ice sheet, miles thick. CO2 dropped to a very dangerous low level, almost so low that plant growth stopped. A little more, less CO2, and we would have had a complete absence of plants. The story of the ice ages is quite interesting. Even the little ice age caused much damage. We know from historic experience, particularly from Europe, that there was starvation, disease, and many deaths as a result of the little ice age, which stopped only 200 years ago. And we're now in the warm phase of the 1500-year cycle. The next cooling should occur within the next decades. Some people think it's already here. We don't know, but our solar physicists seem to be quite certain that it's almost here. So cooling is almost sure to come, one way or another. The 100,000-year-long Milankovitch cycle is expected soon. We had 17 of these in the last 2 million years. The Holocene has now lasted about 12,000 years, which is longer than the average. So we should be approaching another Milankovitch cycle very soon. By the way, these cycles start very gradually. We may be in one without knowing it. We only know by hindsight. So a few hundred years from now, looking back on it, you may decide, yes, this was the beginning of a glaciation. But we can't tell right now. The really strong cooling occurs towards the end of the Milankovitch cycle, so it will occur in about 100,000 years. It's academically uninteresting. But much sooner we will have a return of a little ice age, part of the 10,000 or part of the 1,000 to 1,500 year cycle. That should come sometime in this century. So we don't have much time to waste. Let's look at the final thing, geoengineering. The major glaciations are thought to be triggered by snow fields at around 65 degrees north latitude. We don't know where the trigger is or if it actually exists. That's a hypothesis. It's a theory, but it's easy to check. We have satellites that keep track of the snow distribution, and we can easily tell if there are fields, snow fields, that last throughout the summer. Any snowfield like that could grow from year to year and gradually develop into a major ice field. And that could be the beginning of the glaciation. So the thing to do is to locate the trigger and find the best way to neutralize it. That's not very difficult. But some experimentation is needed. And like any program, it requires a major project. The little ice ages are a little more subtle. They don't have a well-defined trigger. We think we can tell that it's coming from observations of the sun, of sunspots, and we might be able to overcome the little ice age, the cooling phase of the little ice age, with a specially designed greenhouse scheme, but not using CO2. It would use water, which is a much stronger greenhouse agent than CO2. It's of low cost. It could be quite effective. It has low persistence and therefore low eco-risk. I could discuss specific schemes that have been suggested, but that would take us too far. So let me summarize the discussion. My aim here is to change public attitudes from global warming to global cooling, have people focus on global cooling instead of global warming, and forget about carbon dioxide and other fancy energy policies that have been proposed by the White House. So the objective is to replace the present concern about global warming with a concern about the much more dangerous global cooling. That's my mission. I've been working on this now for the last, intensively for the last couple of months, and I hope to continue. This requires a change in policies, and it requires a well-designed research and testing program. We're looking for volunteers who are willing to lead such a program, who know how to raise money, probably from the government, because that's the source of research money these days, to do the research and testing that's necessary. But it's worthwhile. Fighting global cooling is worthwhile. It needs to be done promptly. We don't have much time to lose. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Dr. Singer, I attended your talk at the Heartland Institute in Washington a couple of months ago, and you made a similar presentation. You talked about at the onset, the onset of the ice age, the evidence would be snowfields that don't melt in the summer. They stay frozen all the way through the summer. And I think you had suggested that we could bombard these with some dark material, dust or something, so that they would actually absorb heat and melt the snow and prevent this year-round freezing of the ground. Would you like to elaborate on that?
You're talking about the major glaciation, that is the end of the Holocene. Yes, I can elaborate on that. We can use existing weather satellite records to check the distribution of snow and ice. Snow and ice have a very high albedo, easy to spot, and it should be very easy to learn which ones are growing and which ones are shrinking during the summer. Most of the snowfields will shrink during the summer. Some special ones may survive. Those are the ones we have to go after. The way to go after them, a method suggested many years ago by Joe Fletcher of NOAA, Director of Research for NOAA, is to put soot on them, black soot. And then the sun can do its work. This decreases the albedo, more solar radiation is absorbed, and the snow will melt. So you don't have to do anything very special. Whether it works or not, we don't know. It has to be tested.